Hey there, everybody. Coach Mark here. And before we dive into today's topic, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estrubio. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full time, and the odds are very, very good. I would love to work with you. But with that being said, let's get into it. So in today's video, I'll be introducing you to Tacitus LUTA. This is the second book in the Tacitus Conjugate series, and for those of you who are newer to the channel, Tacitus Conjugate is 3 times a week full body conjugate, and this particular program is aimed at combat athletes such as MMA or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, something I'm going to try and avoid doing is literally just reading the whole book to you. What I'm going to be doing is just talking about it in relatively broad strokes, introducing the days of training as well as why I picked what I did. But at the bottom of this, in the description box, you'll be able to find a link where you can download a full copy of this book for your own reference. With the rising popularity of jiu-jitsu and other combat sports, I think with it what we're seeing is a need to discuss the training of it. I know something I've noticed is a lot of the guys taking up BJJ are former strength athletes. So one of the problems with that is if you had only been training as, say, a power lifter, that type of training does have some transference to the sport of BJJ, but there are other things we need to develop beyond just pure concentric strength. So because this program should be treated as a supplement to your primary sport, that's why I'm opting for the 3 times a week training split, and you'll see what a typical week looks like on screen here. Naturally, you can move the days around based off of your own personal preference, but in general, I don't like training 2 days consecutively if you are training full body, and I don't like having more than 2 days off in a row as well, so this would be a very good starting point you could work backwards from. Now, much like my other programs, this one also has the idea where in accessories, you have a bit of a menu with progressions you can use on them, and you can make any substitutions that you would like. But when in doubt, if you find yourself repeatedly second-guessing yourself, stick to what's written out. So if you'll recall earlier, one of the first things I said was for a combat athlete, or really athletes in general, we don't want to only focus on concentric strength, but we also want to focus on both eccentric and isometric strength. If you look at the needs of the combat athlete, the ability to absorb, redirect, and stop force is very important. It's not enough to simply generate force, especially in something like BJJ where you're grappling. There's a lot of twisting and wrenching type movements. So the first day we're going to be using a triphasic approach. And what that means is for 3 weeks at a time, we're going to focus on slower eccentric movements, and then for 3 weeks at a time we'll be doing paused movements. And then after that we have some basic accessory work such as a neutral grip pull-up. You could also swap this out with something like a lat pull down or a chin up, and I suggest using something like a towel if you need the extra grip work. Then after that will be a lateral lunge or Cossack squats, something along those lines just to help work the adductors and open up the hips. And then lastly, landmine Russian twists or seated Russian twists. This is a really good oblique exercise, and again, we're building that rotational strength, power, and control, which has so much transference, especially for a grappler. So now as far as those first 2 movements go, I have my suggestions of a Swiss bar bench press and a Zercher squat. However, you can make alternative selections based off of what works best for you and your equipment availability. These ones I opted for simply because I feel that they have a lot of transference to the combat athlete and also tend to be very joint friendly. Now, something really worth mentioning too is on the press, some folks find that a flat bench doesn't feel as good as a 30 to 40 degree incline, so in that case, simply reach for the incline. It's a variation that I myself really enjoy as well. Now, regardless of which variations you choose, what you'll want to do is use roughly 95% of a recent 1 rep max, or just think a weight that you could hit on any given day that feels heavy but moves pretty well. And what you'll do is for the first 3 weeks in this program, you're going to do 4-second eccentrics on those movements at the given set rep and percentages. And then for the latter 3 weeks, you'll do 4-second pauses at the bottom of the movements for the given set rep scheme and percentages. This is intentionally done very light because we're focusing on positions that you likely aren't very strong at. And then regardless of which phase you're in, the concentric, that is the lifting phase of the movement, make sure that's always done with intent and acceleration. The second lifting day in the training week is our max effort day, and what we're going to do here is we're actually double dipping. It's going to be both max effort as well as speed type work using contrast type training, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But then after your 2 main heavy movements, you're going to do a chest supported row of your choice, or you could even do a barbell row, you could do a machine row, just whatever you like. Then either a Zercher march or a sandbag carry. These are really good for building core and upper back strength, and if you think about the position, it's akin to a clinch type position. This is also going to help you focus on your breath control and conditioning. Really like this for all sorts of athletes, not just combat athletes. And then after that, some Turkish get-ups. And the kettlebell does seem to get a lot of love in combat sports communities. I like kettlebells a lot. It's not some sort of mythical, magical piece of equipment, but the Turkish get-up itself is a really good bang for the buck type exercise because it's going to build both strength and mobility as well as stability, which is something, again, especially for a former strength athlete switch combat athlete, they're going to benefit greatly from. So speaking first on your upper max effort movement, it's one of those things where we don't want to think about just pure limit strength, but also precision and speed, which is why, again, we'll be implementing contrast type work. Now, as far as variations that I like, I think something such as a 40 to 60 degree incline press, a push jerk, or even a floor press is a really viable option here. And what you'll do is you'll work to either a 5, 3, or 1 rep max, and then perform some EMOM type speed work after your top set at a given percentage of the main lift. This is meant to be done very light because, again, on day 1, we're doing triphasic work, focusing on your eccentric or isometrics, and then on day 2, this is where we focus on pure concentric power. And with this, you'll want to rotate your max effort movement every 3 weeks. And we're going to take this same approach for your lower max effort, but with less overall volume just to help manage recovery. Now, as far as variations, I like front and Zercher squats are always a good option. A deficit deadlift, SSB, or high bar squats. Trap bar deads, both low and high handles are really valuable here. And then box squats with any sort of bar that you like. I think the box squat is particularly valuable because it generates a lot of lower posterior chain strength. So when you think about the grapple, the sprawl, trying to push people over, you're going to get a lot of hip oomph and power. So the box squat probably would be one of my personal favorites to pick here. And then just like we do with our upper max effort, the movement we done to a 5, 3, or 1 rep max, and then some EMOM work thereafter, we're just cutting sets here to help manage volume and recovery, but we're keeping the intensity similar. Now, with both movements, after you've done your max set and you're moving into your speed type work, we're going to do a contrast set. So what that means is, for example, let's say you floor pressed as your max effort lift. Moving into your speed floor press, you'll do 2 to 3 plyometric push-ups immediately after each set of floor press. Whereas if you were deadlifting, you would do 2 to 3 box jumps immediately after your sets on deads. And what this does, again, is it helps build that explosive strength. Contrast work is one of my favorite approaches for building explosive strength, and it is less complicated to set up than something like bands and chains, especially if you are in a more general commercial gym type facility. The third day of the training week is just pump and conditioning type focus here. We're doing some work on joints and muscles that may not get a lot of direct isolation work that also often tend to get pretty beat up in combat sports, just for overall health. And then additionally, you're going to have a 15 to 20 Metcon block to start the workout, which I'll talk about in just a bit. But as far as the movement selection goes on this day, you'll see we're going to start with something such as a back extension, a reverse hyper, or an RDL. And if you are doing the reverse hyper, you might go for a higher rep situation like 3 sets of 20 to 30. But this is just some good generic guidance. Hammer curls, face pulls, and then a rolling tricep extension, as well as a Copenhagen side plank, or just a general side plank, really good for working the obliques, hips, just a great all-around movement that I think more of us need to be doing. Now, when I'm talking about those 15 to 20 minute Metcons, the best way of phrasing it is think CrossFit, but smart. They're mini WODs where we're going to add in loaded movement, but the goal here is not to crush yourself. It's to build breath control and ability to express strength while fatigued. I'll give you some example workouts here in just a bit, but if you want to make your own, think about movements with lower loading and minimal eccentric loading in particular. You want to be at a brisk but sustainable pace. You shouldn't be redlining. You want to be a little gassed by the end, but not cooked. Now, as far as the conditioning workouts go, you'll have some AMRAP options, EMOM options, descending reps, or doing it for time. I've also gone ahead and done it where you have a version that's suited for more of a specialty gym as well as a more commercial gym or Planet Fitness type situation. So here are a couple AMRAP options, again, for both a commercial gym as well as a specialty gym. Just gives you some ideas for what you can do here. You'll see that the movements in general are very explosive in nature, but also ones that you can cycle and move through efficiently. Something like a barbell clean and press doesn't work quite as well because it's harder to cycle reps, whereas something like a push press, there's a bit of a reactive element there, so you can get the benefit of that stretch shortening cycle, which again has more transference to the sport while also building conditioning. Now here are some EMOM type workouts you can consider using. And again, we have commercial gym alternatives available for you. And you'll notice on the second one there with the sled push or sprint, the sprint is going to be a little longer just to help kind of offset the wind-up time you often need on a sprint versus pushing a sled. And then these are descending reps / 4-time workouts. So you just do the appropriate reps. So for example, here in the first workout, it would be 10 sandbag to shoulder each side because it's based off of total reps, then 20 push press, and then 20 hanging leg raises or a scaled alternative. 16 of each, but it's 8 on the sandbag to shoulders because again, we count total reps with these unilateral movements. And then 12 of each or 6 with the unilateral movements. And then we have something here, a 40, 30, 20, 10 approach. Again, these workouts are just some sample ideas you can use to integrate into your own workouts. And you do these at the start of the session. That way, too, it forces you to sort of flutter the brakes a little bit on the pump movements later in the session so you aren't overtraining yourself, cooking yourself, and not recovering well enough to focus on your primary sport. Because again, this is a supplemental program. You are primarily a combat type athlete. If you're running this, you're not a lifter who just dabbles in combat athletes. I mean, maybe you are, but either way, the purpose of this is just to give you a program that allows you to focus more on your sport, and the program then helps build you for said sport. These are the various accessory progressions that are available to you. If you've been on this channel for any amount of time, you've probably seen all of these at one point or another, so there's really not too much to say here. And this is what my own week of Tacitus LUTA would look like were I to run it in a commercial gym. Day one, I'd be opting for bench and front squats as my triphasic movements. Reason I wouldn't do the Zercher as much as I love the Zercher is if I'm good at Zercher, I'm going to use an axle for it. But maybe if I had some good elbow sleeves and fat grips, I'd do that in the commercial gym. Towel pull-ups, landmine Cossack squats, and landmine twists. And you'll notice I also picked what progression I would opt for, just personal taste there. On day two, for the max effort movements, I'm going for a push press and a trap bar deadlift. Then a chest-supported row, Zercher marches, and Turkish get-ups because I'm in a commercial gym. I don't have sandbags, unfortunately. And then lastly, on day three, after my Metcon work, I'm going to hit some back extensions, hammer curls, face pulls, a JM press just because I like that exercise a lot, especially in a Smith machine, and then the Copenhagen side plank. So that wraps up the overview of Tacitus LUTA. Again, if you want to grab yourself a copy, just hit the description box down below so you can download the PDF and you don't have to worry about screenshotting everything. That's really all I've got for you folks, so I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next video.